I am going to tell you about 8 survival techniques used during World War II that were so effective that soldiers were ordered to follow them. Their effectiveness has shocked historians. So now you will see the history of World War II in a different light. World War II was not only a battle between armies and technologies, but also a quiet, daily struggle for each soldier's own life. In the mud of the trenches, under the whistling bullets, ingenious solutions were born that cannot be found in any military manual. These little tricks, devised in moments of calm, often prove to be more important than the most modern weapons. In these inhuman conditions, remarkable ingenuity was born, turning everyday objects into tools for survival.
Warms you right up, doesn't it? Better than rum.
Heroism manifested itself not only in attacks, but also in the quiet, daily struggle with circumstances, where wit became the main weapon. This is a story about how the will to live forced the brain to work when the body had already refused to obey. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how an ordinary can of condensed milk could replace a field kitchen and why a simple soldier's scarf was worth its weight in gold. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of soldier life, which cannot be found in textbooks. In trench life, fire was everything. It provided warmth, hot food, and light in the pitch darkness of the dugout. But ordinary matches instantly became damp in the mud and rain of the trenches. Therefore, the creation of the trench lighter was not a whim, but a necessity, a small victory of soldierly ingenuity over circumstances. The design of this device was ingenious in its simplicity and reliability. The basis was a regular brass rifle cartridge case, which could be found in abundance on any battlefield. Brass did not rust, was durable, and was easy to work with using the simplest tools, such as a knife or bayonet. A wick made of twisted threads from a greatcoat or any other suitable material was placed inside the cartridge case. The wick was soaked in gasoline, kerosene, or even alcohol, any combustible liquid that could be obtained. This system was much more reliable than damp match heads. The most difficult element was the striker, which had to strike a spark. It was made from a piece of a file or any other hardened metal. Special stones from factory lighters or even fragments of ordinary stones of suitable hardness were used as flint. The wheel for striking sparks was the height of ingenuity. It was carved out of a coin or metal button with notches made for better grip on the flint. This detail required patience and a certain amount of skill, but the result was worth it. The assembled structure was compact and practically indestructible. Unlike fragile matchboxes, it was not affected by moisture, dirt, or falls. Such a lighter could serve its owner for months, requiring only periodic refilling with fuel. These trench artifacts became so popular that their manufacture turned into a kind of soldier's craft. Craftsmen exchanged their products for food, tobacco, or other items valuable in the trenches. Each lighter was unique, often decorated with an engraving of the owner's name or the date of a memorable battle. Having a reliable source of fire allowed soldiers to boil water for disinfection, heat up canned food, or simply light a cigarette during brief moments of calm. This small, warm point of light in the cold darkness of the trenches sustained not only physical strength, but also morale. This spark of life was a symbol that even in the darkest conditions, light can be found. This little flame was proof that the human spirit cannot be extinguished. It warmed hands and souls, reminding them of home and normal life. And as long as this wick burned, hope lived on. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about how such simple things affected the morale of soldiers? Write about it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about what killed soldiers more often than bullets? In war, water was the second most important resource after ammunition, but finding clean water was almost impossible. Any source, river, lake, or well, could be contaminated with bacteria. Consuming such water without treatment was guaranteed to cause diseases that took more soldiers out of action than enemy weapons. The most reliable and accessible method of disinfection was boiling. This method required a fire and a pot, but it guaranteed the destruction of almost all dangerous microorganisms. Soldiers were ordered to boil any water from untested sources for at least 10 minutes. However, it was not always possible to build a fire on the front line. Smoke and fire gave away their position. Therefore, chemical decontamination methods were widely used in the Allied armies. The standard ration of British and American soldiers included chlorine or iodine tablets. These tablets were easy to use. Just drop 1 or 2 into a flask of water and wait about 30 minutes. The water acquired a characteristic medicinal taste, but became safe to drink. This unpleasant taste was a small price to pay for one's health. Soviet soldiers often used potassium permanganate, crystals of which were always in their medical kits. A few crystals were dissolved in a pot of water until a pale pink solution was obtained. This method also effectively killed bacteria and made the water safe to drink. When there was no fire or chemicals at hand, soldiers resorted to improvised filters. The simplest filter could be made from several layers of fabric, with clean sand and crushed charcoal from a fire laid between them. Such a filter did not kill bacteria, but it significantly purified the water of dirt. Water could be both a source of life and a cause of slow death. But what if I told you that even food could serve a completely unexpected function and not just satisfy hunger? Read on to the next chapter to find out how a sweet treat turned into a field kitchen. What I am about to show you is not allowed to be shown on regular cooking shows. In conditions of trench warfare, it was practically impossible to set up a full-fledged field kitchen on the front lines. Delivering hot food to the trenches was extremely risky. Therefore, British soldiers, known as Tommies, invented a brilliant and unique device for cooking food: the Tommy cooker. The basis of this invention was an ordinary tin can, but not just any tin can, but one from condensed milk or jam. Such cans were part of the standard ration and were always at hand. Most importantly, they were durable and the right size for creating a mini stove. The secret of the Tommy cooker lay in the fuel. Instead of wood, which smoked and gave away their position, the soldiers used a rope or strip of cloth soaked in combustible material. This rope was laid in a special spiral pattern inside an empty tin can. The fuel most often used was melted fat from canned meat or any other available fat. The rope or cloth was thoroughly soaked with this mixture. This design produced an even, almost smokeless flame that could burn for a long time. The manufacturing process was simple and did not require any special tools. The empty can was cleaned, a wick made of rope was placed at the bottom, which was then poured over with melted fat. After the fat solidified, a large trench candle was obtained, ready for use. On such an improvised stove, it was possible to boil a mug of water for tea, heat up canned meat, or even fry biscuits. To do this, a metal mug or pot lid was placed on top of the can. It was a real luxury in the cold and damp trenches. Tommy Cook provided not only hot food, but also a little warmth. In a damp dugout, even such a small flame could warm frozen hands and raise morale. It was a small haven of comfort in the midst of the hell of war. Soldiers' ingenuity found a way out of any situation, even the most hopeless. Tommy Cook is not just a device, it is a symbol of human adaptability. It proves that the will to live can work real miracles. What if I showed you a time machine made from a simple watch? In combat conditions, especially in unfamiliar terrain, the ability to navigate was equivalent to survival. Not everyone had standard army compasses, and they could be lost. Therefore, every soldier had to be able to determine the cardinal directions using improvised means. The most well-known method was to use a wristwatch with hands. To do this, the watch was placed horizontally, and the hour hand was pointed at the sun. The angle between the hour hand and the 12 mark was divided in half, and the line dividing this angle pointed south. This method was quite accurate and worked in any clear weather. It only required a watch and knowledge of a simple rule. The instructions for scouts paid special attention to this method, as it allowed them to quickly orient themselves. When there was no clock at hand, soldiers resorted to an even simpler method. They stuck a vertical stick into the ground and marked the end of its shadow with a stone. After 15 and 20 minutes, when the shadow shifted, they marked its new position with a second stone. The line connecting the first and second marks indicated the direction from west to east. The first stone was always located in the west, and the second in the east. The perpendicular to this line, accordingly, indicated the north-south direction. In cloudy weather or at night, these methods did not work, and then ingenuity came to the rescue. It was possible to create an improvised compass if you managed to magnetize a needle or blade. To do this, the needle was repeatedly rubbed in one direction on woolen fabric. The magnetized needle was carefully placed on a piece of wood, which was then lowered into a container of water, a puddle or a pot. Floating freely, the needle turned under the influence of the Earth's magnetic field and pointed north with one end. This method required skill, but it was very effective. The ability to quickly determine the cardinal directions turned an ordinary soldier into a scout capable of completing a mission and returning alive. But finding the way was only half the battle. It was just as important to simply survive in the trenches. In the next chapter, you will learn what invisible threat took out more soldiers than the enemy. One of the most insidious dangers of trench warfare was not a sniper's bullet, but so-called trench foot. This condition, caused by prolonged exposure of the feet to cold, dampness, and mud, led to circulatory problems. As a result, thousands of soldiers became disabled without even being wounded. The conditions in the trenches were ideal for the development of this disease. Constant dampness, cold water accumulating at the bottom of the trenches, and the inability to dry shoes created a threat. Soldiers' feet were in wet boots for hours, even days. In the early stages, the disease manifested itself in loss of sensation, tingling, and discoloration of the skin. Then the feet swelled, making walking extremely difficult. In advanced cases, this led to serious consequences. The command of all armies quickly realized the scale of the problem. Losses from trench foot in some units exceeded combat losses. Therefore, combating this disease became one of the priority tasks. The basis of prevention was a simple but difficult instruction. Keep your feet dry and warm. Soldiers were ordered to carry at least 2 pairs of spare socks or foot cloths. Wet socks had to be changed for dry ones at least once a day. A whole system was set up for this purpose. While 1 pair of socks was on their feet, soldiers dried the other pair under their greatcoats on their own bodies. This primitive method was the only one possible in the absence of fires. British soldiers were given special whale fat as a preventive measure. This fat had to be carefully rubbed into the feet before putting on dry socks. The fat created a water-repellent layer that protected the skin from moisture. These measures significantly reduced the number of cases of the disease. Simple rules, changing socks, using fat, and regular examinations, saved many soldiers' feet. This was a case where prevention proved more important than treatment. Guess what an old tin can and hope have in common? Long nights in the trenches were filled not only with cold, but also with pitch darkness. Any source of light could attract the attention of a sniper. Therefore, soldiers needed a safe, compact, and smokeless source of light and heat. The solution was found in the form of a simple design called a trench candle. It required the simplest of materials to make: an empty tin can, corrugated cardboard, and paraffin. All of these could be easily obtained in the field. The manufacturing process was extremely simple. A strip of corrugated cardboard was rolled into a tight roll and inserted tightly into a tin can. The cardboard acted as a large and powerful wick. Then this structure was filled with melted paraffin or wax. Paraffin could be obtained from ordinary candles. It had to be poured slowly so that the cardboard was completely saturated. After the paraffin hardened, the finished product was ready. Such a candle burned for a very long time, from 4 to 6 hours, giving off an even flame. Most importantly, it produced almost no smoke, which made it safe to use on the front lines. The trench candle served several purposes at once. It lit up the dark dugout, allowing soldiers to write letters or clean their weapons. This small island of light in the darkness was of great psychological importance. How many people today do you think would be able to make a candle with their own hands? In the next chapter, you will learn about a material that fell from the sky and was valued as highly as gold. Every downed plane or parachute drop left behind a valuable resource. Dozens of square meters of silk. For soldiers and partisans, this material became a real treasure. Knowing how to use it properly was one of the key survival skills. First of all, parachute silk was an ideal material for making and repairing clothing. It was used to sew light linings for jackets, scarves, and even underwear. Silk retained heat well and was pleasant to the touch. Parachute straps made of durable nylon were no less valuable. These ropes could withstand enormous loads. They were used to build shelters, set traps, and as shoelaces. Thin silk fabric served as an excellent dressing material in the field. In the absence of sterile bandages, a clean piece of silk could be used for dressing wounds. Its smooth texture did not stick to damaged tissue. Silk was also used to make water filters. Folded into several layers, it trapped small particles of dirt and sand. Of course, such a filter did not kill bacteria, but it made the water cleaner before boiling. For pilots and paratroopers who found themselves in enemy territory, parachutes became the basis for building temporary shelters. Stretched between trees, the canopy protected against rain and wind. The white silk of winter parachutes served as excellent camouflage. Maps of the area for pilots and scouts were often printed on silk. Unlike paper, such a map did not get wet in the rain and did not tear. It could be easily hidden by crumpling it into a small ball. Thus, the parachute was not just a means of rescue, but a whole survival kit. It provided clothing, ropes, shelter, and much more. This gift from heaven saved the lives of thousands of soldiers. The most formidable enemy in war was not the enemy, but what was going on in the soldier's mind. Constant tension, fear, and the loss of comrades could break anyone. Therefore, developing psychological defenses was no less important than the ability to shoot. One of the main defense mechanisms was black humor. Soldiers joked about death, danger, and the absurdity of what was happening. These jokes, which would seem cynical to civilians, served as a lightning rod in the trenches. The ability to laugh in the face of danger was a form of protest against inhuman conditions. It was a way of saying, yes, everything is terrible, but we are not broken. Soldier folklore, jokes, stories, songs, helped them stay sane. Another pillar of psychological resilience was routine. Strict adherence to the daily schedule, cleaning weapons, checking equipment, eating meals, created the illusion of order in a world of chaos. These repetitive actions structured time. Even in the most terrible conditions, soldiers tried to maintain some semblance of normal life. They furnished their dugouts, decorating them with photographs of their loved ones. Some started improvised vegetable gardens, growing onions on a patch of land. The hunt for additional comforts played a huge role. The ability to obtain trophy chocolate, an extra can of food, or warm gloves was a way to improve one's life. A successful raid boosted self-esteem and gave cause for pride. Letters from home were a thin thread connecting the soldier to a world where there were no explosions. The opportunity to read lines from loved ones gave hope. Censorship erased details from letters, but it could not erase support. It was these invisible psychological defense mechanisms that served as the armor protecting the soldier's soul. Without it, even the most sophisticated equipment was useless. It was not those who were fearless who won, but those who learned to cope with fear. In war, it is not the strongest who survive, but the most inconspicuous. The art of camouflage was a key skill that distinguished veterans from recruits. This refers not only to camouflage uniforms, but also to hundreds of small tricks. The main rule of camouflage is to blend in with the environment. Soldiers wove tufts of grass, twigs, and leaves into their uniforms and helmets. This helped blur a person's silhouette and make them less noticeable against the backdrop of a forest or field. Special attention was paid to shiny objects. A metal belt buckle, canteen, or even a button could reflect the sun's rays and reveal a soldier's position to a sniper. Therefore, all shiny surfaces were smeared with dirt, wrapped in cloth, or painted. The soldier's face and hands also gave him away. Their shine in the sun was visible from afar. Special makeup was used for camouflage, but more often than not, ordinary dirt, soot, or coal was used. Movement is the main enemy of camouflage. Soldiers learned to move slowly and smoothly, avoiding sudden movements. It was better to lie motionless for several hours than to give themselves away with one careless step. Camouflage was especially important in winter conditions. Against the backdrop of white snow, the dark figure of a soldier was an ideal target. White camouflage robes were widely used, allowing soldiers to practically disappear into the winter landscape. Not only people were camouflaged, but also equipment and positions. Artillery, vehicles, and even tanks were covered with camouflage nets with vegetation woven into them. Trenches and dugouts were carefully camouflaged with turf so that from the air they looked like part of the landscape. These simple but vital rules were not written in the regulations. They were passed on by word of mouth, from one soldier to another. The price for not following them was too high. During reconnaissance or a night attack, any spoken word could be your last. Noise attracted attention and gave away the group's location. Therefore, soldiers used a complex but intuitive system of silent signals to communicate. This system was not uniform across all armies and was often developed within a specific unit. It was based on simple and logical gestures that were easy to remember. The success of the operation depended on the speed and accuracy of their understanding. For example, a raised fist meant stop, freeze. A circular motion of the hand above the head meant gather here. A pointing finger crossing the throat was a universal signal indicating the enemy. The commander could convey an entire order without uttering a sound. With a gesture, he indicated the direction of movement, assigned observation sectors, and gave the order to attack. It was a real choreography performed in complete silence. Flags, or simply hands, were used to transmit signals over long distances. The signals were simple. I see the enemy, the way is clear, help needed. This system was especially important for communication between scattered groups. At night, when visibility was limited, tactile signals were used. The commander walking in front could convey information to the person walking behind by simply touching their shoulder or back in a certain way. The signal was passed down the chain. This system required the highest level of trust and coordination within the group. Each fighter had to not only know the signals, but also constantly monitor the commander and comrades. A momentary lapse in attention could lead to failure. Learning these signals was as important a part of a scout's training as shooting or hand-to-hand combat. After all, in war, the ability to remain silent was often more important than the ability to speak. We have covered only a small part of the techniques and tricks that helped us soldiers survive the hell of World War II. Behind each of these inventions, from the bullet casing lighter to the trench candle, lies not only ingenuity, but also an unyielding will to live. These stories show that the human spirit is capable of adapting to any conditions, even the most unimaginable. War is a tragedy that exposes the worst aspects of humanity, but it also sometimes reveals the best: mutual aid, ingenuity, and incredible resilience. The experience of the soldiers of that time is a harsh lesson in how important it is to appreciate peace and the simple things that seem like real treasures in the trenches. Which of these lessons in survival do you think are still relevant today? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.